All right, let's dive into something super interesting. We got a bunch of research on immunogenic cell death, and it's actually way cooler than it sounds.
Yeah, it really is. Basically, we're talking about cells that trigger your immune system when they die. They don't just sort of fade away.
So, ICD, that's what we'll call it for short today. ICD is basically a specific type of cell death. It's like the cells are going out with a bang and saying, hey, immune system, you got to clean this up, but also like, remember this bad guy, so you can take it down next time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's not just cleaning up. It's about teaching your immune system how to recognize an attack.
So today we're going to be exploring how ICD helps our bodies fight off infections and even cancer. But viruses and cancer cells are always trying to, outsmart the system.
It's a constant battle, like an arms race, yeah. So we're going to uncover how these things try to slip under the radar and how researchers are working on boosting ICD for better cancer treatments.
So before we get too deep into this, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Cells die all the time, right?
Right.
But it turns out there are different ways they can go.
Exactly. Sometimes it's a controlled demolition. It's regulated. We call that RCD, and that's super important for a healthy body. But then other times, it's like an explosion. It's messy, and that's when you get things like inflammation.
So for ICD to really work, it needs two key ingredients.
Okay.
First, you gotta have antigens. Think of those as the bad guy's mugshot so the immune system knows who to look for.
Yeah. And then just as important are these things called adjuvants. They're like red flags, like flashing lights. They say, hey, pay attention. This is serious. Without those, the immune system might just ignore it.
So it's like the difference between a casual heads up and a full-blown all hands on deck alarm, right? So how does this all work in the real world? Let's take a look at the dance of ICD.
Yeah. So imagine it's like a battlefield, but at the microscopic level, you've got three key players. How well the immune system can recognize the threat, how strong those alarm signals are, and the environment where all of this is happening.
Right, if any of those are off, the whole thing might not work as well. But how do dying cells actually send out those alarm signals? Like, do they have tiny little megaphones?
Not megaphones, but they do release these molecules called DAMPs. That stands for Danger-Associated Molecular Patterns. They're basically distress signals.
So like tiny smoke signals saying trouble over here.
Exactly.
I guess there are probably different types of damps, each with a specific message,
You
right?
got it. Some of the well-known ones are ATP, CLLR, and HMGB1. And each of those interacts with the immune system in different ways, triggering different responses.
Wait, ATP, isn't that like the energy molecule, the stuff that powers our cells? That's also a danger signal.
It sure is. It's a multitasker, that's for sure. And then, it's even more interesting. But that's one of those other DAMPs, CLLR, is actually a really ancient molecule. We're talking involved in everything from yeast mating to, get this, fertilization.
Whoa, that's wild. From single-celled organisms to human reproduction, and it's also a key player in our immune defenses. It makes you wonder how something that complex even evolved.
That's the big question. One theory is that ICD might have evolved as a way for multicellular organisms like us to fight off infections more effectively. Imagine the advantage of being able to turn dying cells into weapons against invaders.
It's like their final act of defiance. Even in death, they're helping protect the organism. But if that's true, wouldn't that make ICD a really, really old system, like deeply ingrained in our biology?
That's the thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking millions of years of evolution, from single-celled organisms reacting to threats to the emergence of specialized immune cells, and they all work together using this ICD.
So we've got this ancient system for fighting off invaders. But it's not just any cell death that triggers ICD. It has to be specific kinds of stress, right? It's not like stubbing your toe is going to suddenly activate your immune system.
Exactly, and this is where it gets even more interesting. There's this system called the Integrated Stress Response, or ISR for short, and it's basically like a cellular alarm system.
Oh, okay. So when a cell is under stress, maybe it's infected or damaged, this ISR kicks in.
Exactly, it's like the cell saying, hold on, something is not right here. And this ISR seems to be really crucial for actually triggering ICD.
Wow. So the cell is actually choosing to self-destruct in a way that alerts the immune system. That's pretty strategic.
It is. And then we can't forget about autophagy. That's the cell's recycling system. Sometimes it helps with ICD, sometimes it hinders it. It's kind of a wild card.
So we're starting to see how intricate this system really is. We've got dying cells, stress signals, ancient molecules, and even a cellular recycling system involved.
And that's just the beginning. What's even crazier is that some of our modern cancer drugs might be accidentally mimicking those ancient infection signals, triggering ICD as part of their effect.
Whoa, that's a pretty deep thought. It's like we're tapping into some ancient wisdom to fight these diseases. But wait, we said earlier that viruses and cancer cells are sneaky. They've evolved ways to evade ICD, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They are masters of disguise,
Mm.
constantly trying to stay one step ahead. They can hide, they can block cell death pathways, they can even interfere with those damp signals we were talking about. It's like this constant battle of wits between our immune systems and these, well, crafty foes, let's just say.
So it's like a game of cat and mouse, with our bodies trying to catch these invaders, and they're doing everything they can to just slip away unnoticed.
Yeah, that's the right analogy. And this evolutionary arms race has led to some really, really sophisticated evasion tactics.
All right, this is already blowing my mind. We've gone from dying cells to ancient molecules to this epic battle between our immune system and these crafty invaders. I can't wait to hear more about how researchers are actually trying to boost ICD to fight cancer.
Let's take a break and then we'll dive into that.
Yeah.
That's where things get really interesting with the potential for new and more effective treatments.
So we've seen how ICD works. But like we were saying, these viruses and cancer cells, they're not just going to sit there and take it. They've evolved ways to evade ICD, right?
Well, absolutely. They're masters of disguise. It's a constant back and forth, really.
So let's get into some of those evasion tactics. How do they manage to slip under the radar?
Well, one way is by interfering with those damps. Remember those danger signals?
Right, the eat me flags
Uh-huh.
and the danger alarms.
Exactly. Some viruses and cancer cells can block the release of damps, making it harder for the immune system to even detect them.
Sneaky. So they're basically trying to be invisible to the immune system.
Yeah, pretty much. And some of them, they can even interfere with the receptors on the immune cells that the damps bind to.
Oh, wow. So even if those damps do get released, the immune system can't receive the message.
Exactly. It's like jamming the signal.
Wow. They've thought of everything, haven't they?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how we can ever outsmart them.
Well, that's what researchers are trying to figure out. They're looking at all sorts of ways to boost ICD, make our cancer treatments more effective.
Okay, so let's talk about those promising approaches. We mentioned autophagy and immune checkpoint inhibitors earlier. Can you give us a bit more detail on those?
Sure. Autophagy. Remember, that's the cell's recycling system, right?
Yeah, like a cleanup crew.
Exactly. And sometimes autophagy can actually help release those damps. So researchers are looking at ways to stimulate autophagy, basically, to make cancer cells more visible to the immune system.
So it's like turning up the volume on those distress signals.
Exactly. And then there's the immune checkpoint inhibitors. Those are drugs that basically release the brakes on the immune system.
Oh, right. We talked about how some cancer cells have a don't eat me signal. Did these checkpoint inhibitors work on that?
You got it. Some of them block the don't eat me signal, making those cancer cells vulnerable.
So it's a double whammy. Boosting the eat me signals and blocking the don't eat me signals at the same time?
It is. It is. And there are clinical trials going on right now, testing those approaches both alone and together. And the early results are looking good.
This is all very exciting. It sounds like we're finally starting to understand the language of the immune system. But it's also a bit humbling, right? These things have been around for millions of years, and they're still finding ways to outsmart us.
It is. It is. But it's also really motivating. The more we learn about ICD and these evasion tactics, the more we want to figure out how to, outmaneuver them.
This whole conversation is really making me think differently. I used to think of cancer as this foreign invader, something outside of me. But now I'm thinking it's more like a part of me that's gone rogue.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. And it shows just how complex cancer is. It's not just about killing cells. It's about restoring balance, re-educating the immune system.
Okay, so we've talked about boosting ICD to fight cancer. But you mentioned earlier that ICD might be involved in autoimmune disorders, too. That's a little counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, well, ICD is good for fighting infections and cancer. But remember, it involves those damps. And sometimes those damps can be misinterpreted, leading the immune system to attack healthy tissue.
So it's like friendly fire.
Exactly. And there's more and more evidence that this might be a factor in autoimmune disorders.
So ICD is like this powerful weapon against invaders, but it can also turn against us.
It can. And that's why it's so important to be precise when we're trying to manipulate the immune system. We have to understand how to control these things.
This is all fascinating, but also kind of overwhelming. There's so much we don't know.
That's true, but that's what makes it exciting, too. every new discovery opens up new possibilities.
Yeah.
And the more we learn, the closer we get to using ICD to really make a difference.
Okay, so we've talked about how ICD works, how invaders try to get around it, and how researchers are trying to use it to fight cancer. And we even touched on autoimmune disorders.
And that's just the beginning.
I know. It feels like we could talk about this forever. But I think it's time to bring it all home for our listener. Why should they care about all of this?
That's a great point. And the reason is, this isn't just some theory. This is your body, your defense system. And the more we learn about it, the more potential there is for new treatments and maybe even preventing diseases in the future.
Let's move on and wrap this whole deep dive up. So we've spent all this time talking about this thing called immunogenic cell death, ICD. We've seen how it works, how those invaders try to outsmart it, and how researchers are trying to use it to fight diseases like cancer.
It's like a story of cellular sabotage, ancient defenses and cutting-edge science all happening inside your body.
Yeah. It really makes you think about how complex our bodies are. But it's easy to get lost in the weeds here. So why should you, the listener, care about this? What's the big takeaway?
Well, this isn't just some random scientific concept. This is your body, your defense system, right?
Yeah.
And it's been honed over millions of years. The more we learn about ICD, the more potential we have to find new treatments, maybe even prevent some diseases.
It's like we're discovering a secret weapon that's been inside us all along.
Exactly. Imagine training your immune system to recognize and eliminate those cancer cells before they can even form a tumor.
That would be incredible. But I guess there's still a lot we don't know about ICD. What are the big questions that researchers are still working on?
One of the biggest ones is how to control ICD.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, it's a powerful process. It can be good, but it can also go wrong. So we need to learn how to target it just to the bad cells without, harming the healthy ones.
Right, like avoiding that friendly fire problem we talked about with autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why research is so important, right? We need to understand exactly how those signals work, how the immune system reads them,
Yeah.
and how we can fine-tune things to get the outcome we want.
So what's next? What are scientists excited about in ICD research?
Well, they're trying to find new types of those danger signals, figure out what each one does. The more we know about them, the better we can, manipulate them.
And are there any new ways to stimulate ICD that they're looking at?
Oh, yeah. They're working on drugs that can actually turn on the ICD pathways directly in the cancer cells. Makes them more vulnerable to the immune system. And then, of course, there's a lot of interest in combining therapies like using ICD treatments with other immune-boosting drugs.
So it sounds like there are tons of possibilities. It makes you wonder, where could this all lead? What's the ultimate potential for ICD?
Well, I think it has the potential to completely revolutionize healthcare. I mean, imagine a world where we can use ICD not just to treat diseases, but to actually prevent them, maybe even slow down aging. It's a pretty big idea, but I think it's possible.
Wow, that's amazing. We've gone from these dying cells sending out signals to potentially rewiring our bodies.
And that's what's so cool about science, right?
Okay.
It starts with curiosity, trying to understand things, and then sometimes you end up with these incredible insights that could change the world.
Well, this deep dive has definitely been a journey. I hope it's left you, the listener, with a sense of wonder about how incredible your body is and, all the things it does to protect you.
Remember, this is all happening inside you right now. This constant battle, a testament to how resilient life is.
And as we learn more about ICD, who knows what other secrets we'll uncover, what other amazing things we'll find out. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and never underestimate the power of your own biology.